In a time before the events of The Lord of the Rings, a child was born who belonged to the ancient line of the kings of Gondor and Arnor. The venerable lineage of this boy stood as a whispered promise of hope amidst the gathering gloom that threatened to engulf Middle-earth. Join us as we uncover the events that forged Aragorn's character and journey through the lost adventures of his youth, the secret trails he wandered as a ranger, and the silent battles fought in the dark corners of the world. Discover the courage forged in solitude, the wisdom gleaned from ancient lore, and the strength honed by countless trials. This is not merely a tale of a young king finding his way in a world teetering on the precipice of darkness, but of a boy who carried the burdens of generations, whose heart remained steadfast in the face of overwhelming darkness. In the secluded heart of Eriador's untamed wilderness dwelled Dirhael and his beloved wife Iverwen. Each had been blessed with the gift of foresight, offering them the ability to peer into the future and glimpse events that were yet to unfold. Beneath their watchful gaze, their daughter, Gilrain the Fair, blossomed into a radiant young woman. Like a light shimmering through the forest mist, her beauty captivated all who beheld her. But a man of great power saw her most keenly, drawn to her in ways that spoke of fate and the stirrings of destiny. Arathorn, son of the chieftain of the Dunedain, made it known that he desired to wed the young Gilrain, binding his fate to hers. But Dirhael, her father, was hesitant, for Gilrain was as yet too young, according to their customs, to be considered for marriage. And yet more concerning, his gift of foresight allowed him to see that this path would lead to great sorrow. For he looked into Arathorn's future and saw that he was destined for only a brief journey in this world. Therefore, he would not consent to his beloved daughter being bound to such sorrow and early widowhood. Yet Iverwen also possessed the gift of sight beyond sight, and in the union of these two souls, she beheld something more, a glimmer of hope, faint yet fierce, a hope that would one day rise to light the Dunedain's path. Though the winds of sorrow stirred, she believed this love would bring forth something far greater than the sum of their lives. To this marriage, Dirhael was opposed, for Gilrain was young and had not reached the age at which the women of the Dunedain were accustomed to marry. Moreover, he said, Arathorn is a stern man of full age and will be chieftain sooner than men looked for, yet my heart forebodes that he will be short-lived. But Iverwen, his wife, who was also foresighted, answered, The more need of haste. The days are darkening before the storm, and great things are to come. If these two wed now, hope may be born for our people, but if they delay, it will not come while this age lasts. Thus, Dirhael yielded to the course of destiny, allowing his wife's vision to take root for the sake of their people's future. And so it came to pass that Arathorn was granted his desire, and he took the fair maiden's hand in marriage. In the following year, tragedy struck as Arador, the father of Arathorn, fell doing battle with hill trolls, and so the mantle of chieftain passed to Arathorn. Barely a year later, in the year 2931 of the Third Age, a son was born to Gilrain, the fragile light of hope that was foretold, and they named the child Aragorn. This boy would grow up in the shadow of loss, for when he was but 2 years old, his father rode out in pursuit of orcs, never to return. A single arrow found its mark, piercing through Arathorn's eye and stealing him from this world, leaving behind his son and a grieving widow. Dirhael's grim prophecy had come to pass in all its cold finality. Gilrain the Fair, now a widow wrapped in grief, knew the weight of her burden. Her son was the last glimmer of hope in a world growing dim. And so she took him away to the sanctuary of Rivendell, seeking safety and wisdom, beneath the watchful care of the great elf lord, Elrond Half-Elven. Elrond was as kind as summer and stepped into the void left by Aragorn's lost father with a heart full of affection. In Elrond, the young Aragorn found a beacon of virtue, a paragon of wisdom and fortitude. Under Elrond's vigilant watch, Aragorn was gifted with lessons that would become the bedrock of his strength and character, fostering within him the virtues that would one day define his greatness. The face of Elrond was ageless, neither old nor young, though in it was written the memory of many things both glad and sorrowful. His hair was dark as the shadows of twilight, and upon it was set a circlet of silver. His eyes were grey as a clear evening, and in them was a light like the light of stars. Venerable, he seemed as a king crowned with many winters, and yet hale as a tried warrior in the fullness of his strength. He was the Lord of Rivendell, and mighty among both elves and men. In a quest to shield the child from harm, Elrond bestowed upon him the name Estelle, meaning hope. The child's true name and lineage were shrouded in secrecy, for Elrond was acutely aware that the dark forces sought to unveil Isildur's heir if that ancient bloodline had not already been severed. Aragorn would immerse himself in the ethereal splendor of Rivendell, a sanctuary cradled beneath the whispering embrace of the snow-capped peaks of the Misty Mountains. Here, amidst the timeless beauty of this secluded haven, he would blossom, his heart entwining with the serene essence of this hidden refuge. "Have you often been to Rivendell?" said Frodo. "I have," said Strider. "I dwelt there once, and still I return when I may. There my heart is, but it is not my fate to sit in peace, even in the fair house of Elrond." When Aragorn was but a boy of 10 summers, Rivendell's quiet halls stirred with the arrival of a company of wanderers, their journey taking them to the far-off lonely mountain, Erebor, nestled over the Misty Mountains and beyond the edge of the wild. Gandalf the Grey, wise and mysterious, and the unlikely hero, Bilbo Baggins, were both in the company of Thorin Oakenshield and his loyal band of dwarves. They lingered for over a fortnight in Rivendell, yet whether or not their paths crossed with the young Aragorn remains a mystery. During his time spent in Rivendell, Aragorn would forge a brotherhood with Elladan and Elrohir, the twin sons of Elrond and Celebrian. It was through their bond that Aragorn would be initiated into the warrior's way, mastering the art of tracking and vanquishing orcs amidst the wilds. The twins frequently set out on their quests to hunt orcs, for these forays were fueled by a profound and burning loathing, a fire that blazed fiercely within their souls. Their relentless animosity toward the orcs was born from a sorrowful tale. Their mother, Celebrian, once set out on a journey to visit her own mother, Galadriel, in the realm of Lorien. Yet fate, ever cruel and unyielding, had other plans. As her company traversed the Redhorn Pass, she was seized by the orcs, who dragged her into the shadowy depths of their caves. There, in the cold darkness, they unleashed unspeakable agony upon her. Her sons, Elladan and Elrohir, learning of their mother's plight, spurred their steeds with great urgency. But when they arrived, they found her already marked by a venomous wound. They returned her to Rivendell, where Elrond wielded his healing art with a fervent hope. Although he was able to mend her body, his efforts could not repair the wounds of her spirit. The following year, unable to dwell any longer in Middle-earth, she departed for the Undying Lands, leaving a void that echoed with sorrow. In the wake of this loss, Elladan and Elrohir were consumed by a fierce and unrelenting fury. They rode with grim determination alongside Aragorn and the Dunedain Rangers. Every hunt, an unyielding quest for retribution against the darkness that had stolen their mother away from them. After he returned from one of these orc hunts with the twins, Elrond sensed the moment had come for Aragorn to learn of the destiny that awaited him. Thus, the boy nurtured in obscurity was on the brink of discovering that he was the last hope of a royal bloodline. At the age of 20, Aragorn stood at the precipice of a profound awakening. The veil of his past was to be drawn back, and the full splendor of his true identity was to emerge, revealing a destiny that had long slumbered in waiting. But when Estelle was only 20 years of age, it chanced that he returned to Rivendell after great deeds in the company of the sons of Elrond. And Elrond looked at him and was pleased, for he saw that he was fair and noble and was early come to manhood, though he would yet become greater in body and in mind. That day, therefore, Elrond called him by his true name and told him who he was and whose son. Aragorn stood as the final echo of Isildur's bloodline. Yet, the stream from which he sprang flowed far deeper and carried the legacy of many more remarkable figures than some may realize. Aragorn's lineage is a grand symphony of greatness, woven with the threads of mighty ancestors, formidable men, elves of ancient lore, and a Maya, an entity akin to a demigod. This illustrious heritage courses through Aragorn's veins, imbuing him with great power. To truly grasp the grandeur of Aragorn's lineage, we must delve into the rich tapestry of his family tree and witness the echoes of his storied heritage. Aragorn's parents, Arathorn II and Gilrain, were heirs to the ancient and noble line of the Dunedain chieftains. This legacy stretched back through the ages, tracing its roots to Arvedui and Firiel. Arvedui stood as the 15th and final king of Arthedain, a realm among the three great Dunedain kingdoms that were born from the division of Arnor. His royal bloodline, a thread of destiny woven through the ages, reached back to Isildur. Isildur was the eldest son of Elendil. Alongside his brother Anarion, he forged the realm of Gondor. In the fateful War of the Last Alliance, it was Isildur who severed the ring from Sauron's hand, before claiming it as his own. Firiel was the last queen of Arthedain, and was able to trace her lineage back to Anarion. Anarion was the youngest son of Elendil. As mentioned a moment ago, he and his brother Isildur jointly ruled Gondor, while their father dwelt in the northern realm of Arnor. However, following the death of Elendil, Isildur took up his father's seat and ruled in Arnor, while Anarion ruled the southern kingdom of Gondor. Although Isildur never announced his claim to the kingship of Gondor, this arrangement would lead some to believe that only those descended from Anarion could lay claim to the kingship of Gondor. Although Aragorn was indeed a descendant of Anarion, this was on the maternal side, and therefore some, such as Denethor, the steward of Gondor, would dispute Aragorn's claim to the throne. And now we come to Elendil, who was once a powerful lord of the Dunedain upon the island kingdom of Númenor, under the ill-fated king Ar-Pharazôn the Golden. Ar-Pharazôn, the final sovereign of Númenor, fell prey to the dark whisperings of Sauron, forsaking the light for the malevolent embrace of Melkor worship. Ensnared by such corruption, he led his people into a fateful clash with the Valar, resulting in the cataclysmic destruction of Númenor. Yet, amidst the ruins and sorrow, a glimmer of hope remained. Elendil, true to his faith, guided the faithful amongst the Dunedain to the shores of Middle-earth. There, he forged the mighty realms of Gondor and Arnor, assuming the title of High King. Elendil, though not crowned as King of Númenor, bore the noble blood of its royal family, flowing from the venerable Tar-Elendil, the fourth King of Númenor, via Silmarion, Tar-Elendil's daughter. Tar-Elendil himself could trace his lineage back to the dawn of Númenor's very inception, and to its founder, Elros. Elros, the half-elven, was the son of Eärendil and Elwing, and brother of Elrond. As he is Elrond's brother, this also makes him Arwen's uncle, making this the point at which Aragorn and Arwen's family trees join. Born of both mortal and elven blood, Elrond and Elros were offered the choice to be counted amongst elves or men. Elrond embraced the eternal grace of his elven ancestors, yet Elros relinquished the promise of everlasting life in order to walk the fleeting path of men. Elros, born of Eärendil and Elwing, descended from legends etched in the lore of the First Age of Middle-earth. His parents, whose names shine with the brilliance of myth, were legendary figures in the grand sagas of old. Eärendil, the mariner, ventured across the Western Sea, pleading with the Valar for their aid in overthrowing Morgoth. Then, with a Silmaril blazing upon his brow, he carved a path through the heavens, earning the revered title of the Evenstar. Venturing deeper into the annals of time, we find that Eärendil's mother carries the noble blood of Fingolfin, the High King of the Noldor in the land of Beleriand. This illustrious line flows back to Finwë, the inaugural king of the Noldor, who led his people on an epic pilgrimage from Middle-earth to the sacred shores of Aman. On Eärendil's paternal line, two legendary forebears emerge, Tuor and Huor, two great warriors and champions of mankind whose deeds are etched in the annals of history. Returning now to Elwing, the beloved wife of Eärendil, we discover that Aragorn's heritage winds its way back to two legendary figures of the First Age, Beren and Luthien, whose names resonate with the echoes of ancient heroism and undying love. Luthien's heritage is fascinating, for her mother is one of the Maiar, a class of celestial beings who existed at the very dawn of creation, whose voices shaped the fabric of the world during the sacred music known as the Ainulindalë. Thus, Aragorn carries a sacred essence within him, a whisper of the divine that may go some way to explaining some of the extraordinary gifts and abilities of his kind. But the wonder does not end there. Elu Thingol, Luthien's father, was the revered king of Doriath, a sovereign whose life began in Cuiviénen in the era when the world was young. This is the storied heritage of Aragorn, a lineage that stretches across the ages, entwining grandeur and mystery. His bloodline, a blend of elven grace, a Maia's divine essence, and the rugged spirit of humanity, forms a unique and resplendent legacy. Upon the unveiling of this noble ancestry, Elrond would offer Aragorn the sacred relics of his venerable house. These relics, treasured heirlooms of the kings of men, had been safeguarded through the ages by Elrond himself. The first was the Ring of Barahir, a piece of legendary splendor. Forged by the Noldor in the blessed realm of Valinor, this radiant circlet came into being as the twilight of the years of the trees drew near. From its celestial birthplace, it journeyed through the ages and across the Western Sea, finding its way into the hands of Elendil and his noble descendants via the kings of Númenor. The second relic was the Shards of Narsil. During the siege of Barad-dûr, King Elendil wielded Narsil with valor, but fate was cruel. As he fell beneath Sauron's wrath, the blade broke in half. In that fateful moment, Elendil's son, Isildur, seized the broken hilt shard and used it to sever the One Ring from Sauron's hand. Some years later, after Isildur's fate had been sealed during the disaster of the Gladden Fields, the Shards of Narsil were salvaged and brought to the sanctuary of Rivendell, where they would await their destiny in the quiet refuge of Elrond's halls. The third was the Scepter of Annúminas, a silver staff that journeyed from the lost land of Númenor to the heart of Middle-earth. Carried by Elendil himself, the staff was a symbol of the kings of the Dúnedain. Yet Elrond chose to keep the scepter from Aragorn, telling his fostered son that he must first earn the right to wield it. Awakened to his noble heritage, with Narsil's fragment glinting in his grasp and the ring of Barahir adorning his hand, he found his existence illuminated with a newfound purpose. But fate had yet more magic to weave into the fabric of his journey. For soon, Aragorn was destined to encounter the fairest vision in all of Middle-earth, Arwen Undomiel. Arwen, the cherished daughter of Elrond, had long dwelled in the realm of Lothlorien with her grandmother Galadriel. And now, she had returned to Rivendell, her arrival unknown to Aragorn. Aragorn roamed in solitude in the woods near to Rivendell as his spirit soared with unspoken joy. He sang with the abandon of one who has found new hope, and all seemed well in the world that day. But as his song wove through the air, his gaze fell upon a figure among the delicate white trunks of the birch trees. He paused, struck with wonder, as if he had stepped into a dream conjured by his own longing. For Aragorn was, at this very moment, reciting a verse from the Lay of Luthien, recounting the fateful meeting of Luthien and Beren amidst the Neldareth forest. And it seemed that before him, here in Rivendell, Luthien had appeared like a vision, draped in a shimmering garb of silver and blue. For a heartbeat, Aragorn stood transfixed, his breath caught in wonder. Yet, apprehensive that this moment of grace might slip away forever, he called out, "Tinuviel! Tinuviel!" echoing the cry of Beren from the ancient days. And so, there in those fair woods, Aragorn and Arwen's paths intertwined. As the days after their meeting drifted by, Aragorn grew quiet and reserved. Gilrain noticed this unspoken transformation in her son and coaxed from him the story of his encounter with Arwen. Thus, Gilrain spoke to her son of the daughter of Elrond, describing her as the embodiment of grace and beauty in a world that had forgotten such splendor. She reminded her son that the union of mortal and elvenkind was a relic of a bygone era, a memory from a time when their people were at the height of their glory before the blood and the strength of the Dunedain had begun to wane. And Elrond too perceived of Aragorn's affection for his daughter. Summoning him to his chamber, Elrond's voice became a vessel for prophecy, foretelling a future shaped by destiny. "Aragorn, Arathorn's son, Lord of the Dunedain, listen to me. A great doom awaits you, either to rise above the height of all your fathers since the days of Elendil, or to fall into darkness with all that is left of your kin. Many years of trial lie before you. You shall neither have wife nor bind any woman to you in troth until your time comes and you are found worthy of it. But as for Arwen the Fair, Lady of Imladris and of Lorien, even star of her people, she is of lineage greater than yours, and she has lived in the world already so long that to her you are but as a yearling shoot beside a young birch of many summers. She is too far above you, and so I think it may well seem to her. But even if it were not so, and her heart turned towards you, I should still be grieved because of the doom that is laid on us." Elrond felt the weight of destiny pressing upon him, knowing that soon his children would face an agonizing crossroads, to remain bound to him and accompany him to the undying lands where they would reunite with their mother, or to sever their ties of kinship and remain, dwelling as mortals in Middle-earth. With the words of Elrond ringing in his ears and an agonizing longing in his heart, Aragorn bade him farewell. On the morrow, he said his goodbyes to his mother, Gilrain, to the sanctuary of Elrond, and to Arwen, before venturing forth into the wild. Aragorn, embracing his destiny, stepped into his rightful role as the 16th chieftain of the Dunedain as he ventured forth into the untamed expanse of Middle-earth. Beneath the fading echoes of the once mighty kingdom of Arnor, Aragorn's people still lingered, remnants of the glory of a bygone era. This realm, once resplendent, had been torn asunder by long centuries of division and as a result of the harrowing Angmar Wars. Yet amid the ruins and scars, the spirit of the land refused to surrender. Clinging to their love for a land that had shaped them, the people of this once mighty realm became the Rangers of the North, a noble force who long stood vigil over the northern lands. But my home, such as I have, is in the north, for here the heirs of Valandil have ever dwelt in long line unbroken from father unto son for many generations. Our days have darkened, and we have dwindled, but ever the sword has passed to a new keeper. And this I will say to you, Boromir, ere I end. Lonely men are we, rangers of the wild, hunters, but hunters ever of the servants of the enemy, for they are found in many places, not in Mordor only. Upon ascending to the role of chieftain, Aragorn toiled for nearly 3 decades in a relentless crusade against Sauron. His journey was marked by arduous trials and relentless hardship, leaving him with a rugged look that spoke of his burdens. Yet, to the people, he still appeared as a figure deserving of reverence, as a king in exile who, even in these hard times, could not help but reveal the essence of his noble spirit. In those days, Aragorn crossed paths with a grey pilgrim, a wizard cloaked in mystery who called himself Gandalf. What Aragorn could not yet fathom was how deeply this meeting would shape his life. Gandalf would soon become not only a trusted companion, but a mentor, imparting unto him knowledge as vast as the lands they traveled. Side by side, they ventured through untamed wilderness and faced many dangers. Yet, as the seasons turned, the wizard began to place more burdens on the shoulders of the young ranger, trusting him to walk alone. It was at Gandalf's quiet urging that Aragorn's eyes shifted to a quiet and peaceful area of Arnor known as the Shire. For years, the Rangers had guarded its borders, a silent shield for those who lived unaware of the wider world's dangers. Stirred by a growing sense of the Shire's importance, Aragorn doubled the strength of the watch that protected this unassuming haven, where the Shire folk dwelled in peace, blissfully unaware that they might hold greater weight in the weaving of the fate of all Middle-earth than they could ever imagine. Between the years 2957 and 2980 of the Third Age, Aragorn would steadfastly defend the West against the shadow of Sauron in any way that he could. Thus he became at last the most hardy of living men, skilled in their crafts and lore, and was yet more than they, for he was elven-wise, and there was a light in his eyes that when they were kindled, few could endure. His face was sad and stern because of the doom that was laid on him, and yet hope dwelt ever in the depths of his heart, from which mirth would arise at times like a spring from the rock. In these long years, yearning to shroud his true identity, Aragorn donned a number of aliases and earned acclaim under these mysterious names, the foremost of which was the name Thorongil. Draped in a cloak adorned with a silver star, he moved with a swiftness and possessed a sharp vision akin to that of an eagle. Hence, the name Thorongil emerged, which, in the tongue of Sindarin, translates to Eagle of the Star. As Thorongil, he first served under King Thengel of Rohan, the father of King Theoden. Then, his path led him to serve the steward, Ecthelion II of Gondor, who, besieged by the encroaching darkness of Mordor, desperately sought stalwart men to safeguard the realm. However, Thorongil was more than just another sword at the command of the steward. His counsel was thoughtful and wise, his words like steady hands guiding the steward. He even warned Ecthelion of the shadow which grew within Saruman's heart, urging him not to be swayed by the White Wizard. Instead, he encouraged the steward to place his trust in Gandalf, whose loyalty remained true in those darkening days. Thorongil also rose to greatness in the midst of battle, mastering the ways of both land and sea, a leader whose mere presence inspired awe and reverence. In those foreboding times, as shadows gathered and Ecthelion braced for the storm of Sauron's return, Thorongil foresaw the peril threatening the southern fiefs. For the fierce and merciless corsairs of Umbar were readying an attack. With a force provided to him by Ecthelion, Thorongil took to the sea. Under the cover of darkness, his ships, like harbingers of doom, swept silently through the night. Suddenly and without warning, their shouts erupted in the night as the ships of Gondor brought fire and death. The battle waged on, and in the tumult, a desperate close-quarters combat ensued as the men of Gondor and the corsairs drew their swords. Thorongil soon found himself facing the savage captain of the corsairs in a one-on-one duel. In this clash of steel, Thorongil slew his fearsome foe, drowning the hopes of the corsairs, leaving them adrift and rudderless. Thorongil vanquished the corsair threat with minimal losses to his own ships and men, earning great renown for his strategic brilliance in the battle. Accordingly, great glory awaited him in Minas Tirith, where he would have received a hero's welcome. Yet, he did not return to the White City. From the shores of Pelagia, he sent word to Ecthelion, a message of somber farewell. He spoke of distant roads that beckoned him with haste, and told the steward that destiny would not guide his steps back to Gondor for many a year. A part of the reason for this decision may have had something to do with the whispers of tension that were stirring regarding Ecthelion's son. Denethor was sharp-eyed and guarded. He may have sensed the hidden truth of Thorongil's heritage and feared that he and Gandalf conspired to one day supplant him. And so, to the deep sorrow and bewilderment of his companions, Thorongil ventured across Anduin, and there they caught their last glimpse of him. He stood in stillness, lost in thought, his gaze fixed upon the brooding peaks of the Mountains of Shadow, which loomed dark upon the borders of Mordor. But what errands called Aragorn away from Gondor with such haste? Tolkien tells us that Aragorn was exploring the hearts of men, good and evil, and learning about the plots and devices of the servants of the Dark Lord. For many other realms of men existed in the east and south. There, in lands both wondrous and perilous, he sought the hidden truths of men, seeking out the light and darkness within their souls. He would unveil the schemes and secrets of those who served the Dark Lord and delve deep into the shadows cast by the lingering spirit of Melkor. I have had a hard life, and long, and the leagues that lie between here and Gondor are a small part in the count of my journeys. I have crossed many mountains and many rivers and trodden many plains, even into the far countries of Rhûn and Harad, where the stars are strange. It may seem peculiar that Aragorn chose to venture into these unknown lands, where few others deemed it worthy to venture. Yet, there were forces at work here that acted against the will of the Dark Lord, who held sway. For in those distant reaches of Middle-earth, the two blue wizards still dwelled, fighting a silent battle, waging their hidden war against the will of the Dark Lord in those far-flung reaches of the world. Their mission, secretive and perilous, was to fracture the dark grip of Sauron, a force that cast long, brooding shadows over those desolate kingdoms. Without their defiance, the united might of the East would have risen as one under Sauron's banner like a storm, ready to consume the free peoples of the West. Perhaps Aragorn traveled to these forsaken realms to aid them in their efforts, knowing that in these lands the seeds of rebellion must be sown if the West was to prevail. Their task was to circumvent Sauron, to bring help to the few tribes of men that had rebelled from Melkor worship, to stir up rebellion, and after his first fall, to search out his hiding, in which they failed, and to cause dissension and disarray among the Dark East. They must have had very great influence on the history of the Second Age and Third Age in weakening and disarraying the forces of the East, who would both in the Second Age and Third Age otherwise have outnumbered the West. Aragorn walked many paths, but few were as dark and perilous as the one that led him into Moria. He spoke of this to the Fellowship. His voice was low as he told them how he had passed through the Dimrill Gate, venturing into the deep, forsaken halls of stone. The memory, he confessed, was evil, making him hesitant to venture once again into such blackness. To do so, even once, spoke not only of his courage, but of a will tempered by hardship. It is even told that Aragorn ventured into the desolate expanse of Mordor. The shadow of Sauron loomed once more, calling all evil things to him. Yet Aragorn, with the fortitude of a king and the courage of a warrior forged in the fires of destiny, dared to traverse the Black Land. It was as he emerged from the depths of the all-encompassing darkness of Mordor that he yearned to return to the light of elven realms, seeking solace and respite. Little did he know that within this longing for peace, a serendipitous meeting awaited, one that would forever alter the path of his fate. At the age of 49, weary from the trials that had marked his path, Aragorn found himself longing for solace. The weight of countless dangers bore heavily upon him, and his heart yearned for the tranquil haven of Rivendell, where he could seek respite before venturing further. But first, his journey brought him to the edge of Lothlorien. There, the Lady Galadriel welcomed him into the secretive embrace of her lands. Unbeknownst to him, Arwen Undomiel lingered once more among her mother's kin. She had changed little since Aragorn last saw her, although she now possessed a deepened air of solemnity, and the sound of her laughter had become scarce. Meanwhile, Aragorn had matured into his full glory, both in body and spirit. Galadriel, with a gaze that spoke of ages past, bade him shed his weary garments. She robed him in silver and white, draping him in a cloak of elven grey and adorning his brow with a radiant gem. In that moment, he took on the bearing of a noble elf lord, and as Aragorn approached Arwen beneath the golden-bloomed trees of Caras Galadhon, her heart knew its course and her fate was sealed. For a time they dwelled together under the sylvan splendor of Lothlorien's glades until the moment of his departure drew near. On the Midsummer's Eve, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and Arwen, daughter of Elrond, ascended the hill of Ceren Armroth. There, amidst the eternal grasses, Elenor and Nifredil, they walked barefoot, their souls entwined. From that sacred hill, they gazed eastward toward the encroaching shadow and westward toward the distant twilight, where the undying land stretched across the sea. There, in the heart of that ancient realm, they pledged their love and rejoiced in their union. And Arwen said, "Dark is the shadow, and yet my heart rejoices, for you, Estelle, shall be among the great whose valor will destroy it." But Aragorn answered, "Alas, I cannot foresee it, and how it may come to pass is hidden from me. Yet with your hope I will hope, and the shadow I utterly reject. But neither, lady, is the twilight for me. For I am mortal, and if you will cleave to me, Evenstar, then the twilight you must also renounce." And she stood then as still as a white tree, looking into the west, and at last she said, "I will cleave to you, Dunedain, and turn from the twilight. Yet there lies the land of my people, and the long home of all my kin." When Elrond faced the weight of his daughter's choice, he remained silent, though the sorrow in his heart was palpable. The fate he had long dreaded was now upon him. And so, when Aragorn returned to Rivendell, Elrond summoned him. Yet Elrond spoke to him not with scorn, but with love, revealing that though Aragorn was cherished as his own son, Arwen's immortality was a gift too precious to be surrendered for anyone less than the king of both Gondor and Arnor. Therefore, for Elrond, triumph over Sauron would be bittersweet, but for Aragorn and Arwen, it held the promise of a future in which they may find peace and joy. As the shadows deepened and a shroud of fear crept across Middle-earth, Sauron's might swelled, and the towers of Barad-dûr reached ever higher, looming like a menace over all. Yet, even as the world trembled beneath this growing dread, Aragorn strode forth once more, stepping into the storm, his path lit by the flame of purpose, undaunted by the darkness. Arwen lingered in Rivendell, her soul ever bound to Aragorn, though his path carried him far beyond her sight. From a distance, she guarded him with her thoughts, and with a heart full of hope, she crafted for him a banner of unmatched splendor, worthy only of one destined to claim lordship of the Númenóreans, to walk in the footsteps of Elendil and claim the throne of his forebears. In the year 3001 of the Third Age, as Sauron, no longer veiled in shadow, gathered strength once more within the land of Mordor, Aragorn met with Gandalf. Together, they hunted for whispers of Gollum, the wretched creature whose fate was tangled with the ring. But their search at first yielded nothing, for Gollum, drawn by a sinister force, had crossed into the black lands of Mordor and fallen into the clutches of Sauron. There he was imprisoned and tortured, and in the shadows of despair he languished, bound and broken. Around this time, Gilrain bid Elrond farewell and made her way back to her kin in the wilds of Eriador, choosing a life of solitude. She seldom saw her son, as Aragorn's destiny led him to wander through distant lands. Yet there came a time when Aragorn returned to the north, and they met once more. In the stillness of their reunion, Gilrain's voice, heavy with the weight of time and sorrow, wove solemn words. "This is our last parting, Estelle, my son. I am aged by care, even as one of lesser men, and now that it draws near, I cannot face the darkness of our time that gathers upon Middle-earth. I shall leave it soon." Aragorn tried to comfort her, saying, "Yet there may be a light beyond the darkness, and if so, I would have you see it and be glad." But she answered only with this linod, "Onen I Estelle Edain, U Kerbin Estelle, Anim," and Aragorn went away heavy of heart. The words that Gilrain spoke to her son translate to, "I gave hope to the Dunedain. I have kept no hope for myself." Note that the word Estelle is capitalized. This is because the name that Elrond gave to Aragorn was Estelle, meaning hope. Gilrain's final words to Aragorn then carried a double meaning. She didn't merely offer them hope, she gave them her son, her greatest gift, her heart's most cherished treasure, to guide them through the shadows. Just as Gilrain had foreseen, she did not live to witness the War of the Ring. Before the following spring could bloom, her light faded, and Aragorn's world grew a shade darker. And so, the years marched on, bringing the War of the Ring ever closer, like a storm gathering at the horizon, inevitable and vast. Gandalf's suspicions grew like shadows at dusk, dark and creeping, as the weight of a terrible possibility began to press upon him. The ring Bilbo had chanced upon by the dark waters of Gollum's Lake may well be the one. Accordingly, seeking more information regarding this ring, in the year 3009 of the Third Age, Gandalf and Aragorn renewed their pursuit of Gollum. The wood was full of the rumor of him, dreadful tales even among beasts and birds. The woodman said that there was some new terror abroad, a ghost that drank blood. It climbed trees to find nests. It crept into holes to find the young. It slipped through windows to find cradles. Aragorn combed the wild and forgotten places of Middle-earth, wandering the misty banks of Anduin, the darkened depths of Mirkwood, and the windswept plains of Rhovanion, all the way to the shadowed borders of Mordor. And it was close to the borders of the Black Land that Aragorn finally overtook his elusive quarry. He had tracked Gollum into the Dead Marshes, braving the faces of the dead and their candles, and this is where he finally captured the wretched creature. Aragorn now faced a daunting task. He needed to lead Gollum to Thranduil's halls in Mirkwood, far to the north. Every step was fraught with danger, and Sauron's spies were everywhere, so Aragorn took an unexpected road, driving Gollum through Emyn Muil. They then crossed the mighty Anduin at a quiet place. Here, he bound Gollum to a log, and braving the current, swam across the wide waters. From there, they pressed north, slipping through the fringes of Fangorn's ancient woods, its looming trees bearing silent witness to their passage. The journey then led them over the waters of Limlight and the murmuring streams of Nimrodel and Silverlode, which flowed down into the realm of Lothlorien. Aragorn then took care to steer clear of the grim shadows of Dimril Dale, his path bending eastward as they passed over Gladden. As they neared the Great Carrack, Aragorn would have felt a sense that the most perilous part of the journey had ended. As, although Anduin once again crossed their path, this time Aragorn had allies. For the Beornings protected these lands, and they lent their aid to Aragorn's cause, helping him to cross the Great River. From here, Aragorn and Gollum entered Mirkwood, and here, within the woodland realm, Thranduil's dungeons awaited. 900 miles they had traveled, each step a burden heavier than the last. But with iron resolve, Aragorn pressed on. For 50 long days, weariness clung to him, yet he never faltered. Having accomplished this grueling task, Aragorn turned westward towards the Shire and Bree, where he was soon to meet 4 new companions. Following Gollum's capture, Aragorn and Gandalf journeyed westward together before going their separate ways once again. Upon his return, Aragorn stood watch with his loyal Dunedain rangers as they vigilantly watched over the Shire, ever searching for the servants of the enemy. Soon, news arrived from Gildor Inglorion, who was the leader of the elves that Frodo encountered as he was leaving the Shire. Gildor's news was regarding the Black Riders, whose dark presence had been noted by the elves. But Gildor also spoke of Gandalf, who had vanished, leaving no word behind as to his whereabouts. These dire tidings fell heavily upon Aragorn. He was now aware that the malevolent forces of the enemy were moving faster than ever, converging upon him like a storm. Aragorn also received word from Gildor that Frodo had ventured forth from Bag End. Aragorn stood at a crossroads, where every path which now lay before him whispered of uncertainty. He would undoubtedly have liked to search for Gandalf, yet he knew that he must find the hobbits as soon as possible and guide them safely to Rivendell as Gandalf had intended. For they carried the weapon of the enemy, and with the Black Riders abroad, they could not be left without a guide or a protector. Therefore, he chose to take up vigil upon the East Road. And then, at last, they came, the hobbits, fragile yet brave, stumbling through a world so much larger than themselves. Without hesitation, Aragorn followed and observed them as they sat in the glow of the flickering hearthlight of the prancing pony in Bree. After observing their clumsy attempts to veil their identities and intentions, Aragorn sought out a private audience with the hobbits. His voice was grave as he warned them of the Black Riders that prowled in the shadows. He proposed himself as their guide and after Frodo received a note from the absent-minded Barlam and Butterbur, which bore Gandalf's endorsement of Strider, Frodo consented. As the weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders once again, Aragorn's courage and leadership would be needed more than ever, for the days of darkness were now upon them. Mordor would soon stir, and the earth would tremble beneath the march of war. Sword would sing and shield would splinter, and the air would ring with the drums of war. The flame of hope that was foretold by his grandmother burned now, brighter than ever, and Aragorn was ready to face the evil rising from the east and to lead the west in its darkest hour, not as Estelle, not as Thorongil, and not as Strider, but as Aragorn, son of Arathorn, King Elisar, the Flame of the West. Thank you very much for tuning into Realms Unravelled. Before I bid you a fond farewell, we would like to take this opportunity to light the beacons and call for aid. If you did enjoy this video, we would ask that you kindly click the like button below. Also, we would be very grateful if you would consider subscribing and clicking on the bell icon. By doing so, you will be notified when we upload new videos. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, farewell, fellow explorers of Middle-earth.